Welcome to today's library seminar. I'm Lisa Clark, one of the reference librarians at the NOAA Central Library. We are very excited to have Paul Holthus, CEO of the World Ocean Council, here today to speak about his organization's Smart Ocean, Smart Industries program. Paul will be introduced by NOAA's Global Ocean Monitoring and Observing Program Director, Dr. David Legler. But before that, here are a few logistical tips to help you enjoy our presentation today. If you're having trouble with the audio or visual components of GoToWebinar, please log out and rejoin us. This usually resolves technical issues, but if you're still experiencing problems, let me know by sending an email to library.seminars@noaa.gov. This presentation is being recorded and will be available on the NOAA Central Library YouTube channel, as well as the Library Seminars website by tomorrow morning. We will also be accepting questions throughout the webinar, which Paul will address at the end of his presentation. Please feel free to type your questions in the question box on the right side of your screen at any time throughout the presentation. So with that, I thank you for attending this library seminar, and I'm going to turn the presentation over to David Legler.
Thank you, Lisa. I really appreciate the opportunity today to introduce Paul. Paul founded the World Ocean Council, WOC, which is an international leadership alliance on ocean sustainable development, science, and stewardship that brings together a unique set of leaders from investment, shipping, fisheries, aquaculture, tourism, oil and gas, offshore renewables for collaboration and action. This World Ocean Council and Paul really serves as a middleman or a nexus between sort of ocean science, ocean activities, and observing, for which the IOC and NOAA and GOOS and the commercial sector and shipping companies. And Paul has been acting in this space for many years, for at least 10 years that I've known Paul, and probably longer. He'll tell us a little bit more about the history. He's worked on and facilitated numerous projects that are brought together companies like Maersk and organizations like NOAA and GOOS in support of ocean observing and monitoring. Paul has held senior positions with the United Nations Environmental Program and other international organizations, and has been a speaker at business and ocean science and observing meetings for many years. So he's here today to talk about his Smart Ocean, Smart Industries program. So Paul, welcome, and we look forward to the presentation today.
Great, thanks very much for that introduction, David, and thanks, Lisa, for organizing this. Really happy to have the opportunity to bring to the attention of NOAA, and I've been dealing with folks at NOAA off and on for many years, in many roles that I've played and had in different organizations over the decades, but in particular over the last 10, 12 years in relation to the World Ocean Council and the role of industry. And so that's really what I'd like to focus on today, especially the role of industry in increasing and advancing ocean weather and climate observations, and what we call the Smart Ocean, Smart Industries program. So let me begin by a little bit of sort of background and context quickly in terms of the size and diversity of the ocean business community that we bring together in the World Ocean Council as the unique global organization focused on business, the ocean, and sustainable development. And one way to think about this ecosystem, ocean business ecosystem out there is, we obviously, all of us know the direct ocean users, the kinds of companies that are physically in and on the ocean, shipping, fishing, oil and gas, offshore renewables, etc., tourism, and others. But they are all supported by a vast and diverse web of support industries. So obviously shipbuilding, supporting shipping, along with marine fuels, maritime electronics, and a whole range of other sectors. Aquaculture requires the hardware, the nets, the feed, the seafood processing, etc. So this complex web or ecosystem that we like to refer to as the ocean business ecosystem is also supported by the legal, maritime, and finance community to really make all of this growing ocean use possible. And we know that there are not only these long-standing traditional uses of the ocean that have been around for many centuries, some of them, but an increasing level or increasing number of new areas, renewables being one of the most obvious, but things like carbon sequestration and potentially carbon dioxide removal coming into the ocean, future of the ocean, mining, deep seabed mining possibly, So we've got new kinds of uses, but also increasing levels, duration, intensity, frequency of existing uses spreading into new areas, with the Arctic being the most obvious example of where large new areas of the ocean are being exposed to and participating in the global ocean economy. I want to give you a sense of how big and rapidly growing that ocean economy is by just providing a little bit on each of the key sectors. I'm not going to go into details here, but would encourage you to just look at the graphs and the trajectories here. Obviously, these are all pre-COVID trajectories, and there'll be there is a significant impact on all of these sectors this year, and it will be important and interesting to see how the recovery takes place and what that means for the various industries. But shipping in particular, to start with, the graph on the right, you can really see the projected existing and projected growth of the role of maritime transport and its importance to the global economy. Related to that, small in numbers but big in profile, is the cruise ship industry, cruise line tourism, which of course has taken a huge hit and effectively been closed down since early this year. But up until then was one of the most steadily and robustly growing industries on the planet, as you can see from the figures and the graphs here. And so again, very important to see how this will be able to recover and adapt to COVID, and also important, of course, in terms of the developing country areas that become more involved in ocean activities through the presence of cruise ship tourism. Aquaculture, as many of you would know at NOAA, has been the fastest growing food production system of any kind on the planet for many decades, and continues to be a growth area and an important part of the protein supply for the future of the planet as population continues to grow, and moving further offshore into deeper waters as technology, feed, hardware improves. Fisheries continue to be a core part of the ocean economy, even though, as per the previous slide, the level of biomass coming out of the ocean for seafood from wild capture fisheries has plateaued. Fisheries have moved further offshore, deeper waters, greater use of technology, and will continue to be an important part of the ocean economy for a long time to come. And great progress is being made in the US and through NOAA's work, and increasingly in other parts of the world, to achieve the sustainable fisheries that we've all been working towards for many, many years. And we'll talk more about the number of vessels involved in the fishing industry and how that plays into the opportunities for observations. Offshore oil and gas also continues to be an essential part of, or a core part of the ocean economy. Of course, many growing challenges and changes to the oil and gas industry overall, and that is as market prices and demand change, and that's affecting how much and to what areas and to what depths the oil and gas industry will continue to explore and produce, but certainly for foreseeable couple of decades, the ocean will continue to be a source of important hydrocarbon production. The other kinds of offshore energy are extremely exciting and growing rapidly, with offshore wind leading the way. Especially in Europe, as most of you would know, the growth now is just starting to hit in the US, in the Northeast US, but also exploration of potential in Hawaii and California, other areas, and especially where growth is really starting to boom is in Asia. And as per the graph on the lower right, the important new boom in offshore renewable wind energy will be in the floating wind market, and this is what will open up vast areas of high value wind potential to energy production, as we can move those platforms into not being fixed to the seabed bottom, and this is something that's really moving extremely rapidly now. ocean energy from wave, tidal, thermal gradients, etc., is something that continues to be an important energy potential for the planet, with huge numbers associated with the theoretical potential. Still, the challenges of developing technology that can survive the harsh conditions of operating in the marine environment and producing that energy, and then connecting the grid connections, etc. A lot of experimentation going on in Europe in particular, and a few other locations, including in the US. And this is something that's really a space to watch carefully as the innovators and more the mainstream utilities and infrastructure developers get into this ocean energy potential. Submarine telecoms, the reason we are all connected here now is because of this vast and growing network of now 1.2 million kilometers of submarine cables that account for the carrying 98% of international internet traffic. Hugely important for developing countries to become better connected to the global economy, with some data showing very clearly that once broadband internet is available, economies have a significant jump. But still also for the developed world, as cables are being planned for Transarctic and additional connectivity in many parts of the world due to the growth in social media and financial transactions. So if you put this picture together on a global scale, and this is what we do at the World Ocean Council, is to really look at all of the ocean industries and how they, what their global map is, and help them to think about the other sectors and think about it as a global ocean operating environment, and their interaction with these other sectors and their interaction with the rest of the world. And when you really look at that global map, as many of you and your colleagues have done to help put together this this global scale picture of the status of the marine environment, we know that all of the ocean is impacted by human activity to one extent or another. And this is the message I give to the ocean industries. I speak at a lot of industry events, and I almost always show this map to help people understand what the global view of the ocean is from government, the environment community, the science community, and others, that's driving this concern and the need for leadership and action on the part of the business community. And this has led to the formation of the World Ocean Council. This situation and the realization, or the fact that no one company and even one sector can completely affect the trajectory of ocean health and productivity. It's a global dynamic ocean ecosystem. It's a global ocean business ecosystem. And so there's a need for leadership and collaboration to undertake the actions necessary on the part of the private sector. So the World Ocean Council was formed formally about 10 years ago, after a decade or so of developing the network that forms the basis for it as a membership organization at its core, to really develop that alliance or coalition on what we call corporate ocean responsibility, bringing together all of the sectors that I was mentioning earlier, as well as the investment and legal community and others. And this has really become recognized as the global platform for ocean business and sustainable development, with recognition by a range of UN agencies that I'll mention a bit more about in a few minutes. And amongst other things, creating an ocean investment platform to bring together industry and investors and innovation. Overall, the goal, as you can see, is to harness the role of industry in working towards a healthy and productive ocean and its sustainable use and stewardship. So it's about business, responsible ocean business, along with achieving and maintaining a healthy ocean. Importantly, this is driven by creating business value. So it's something that that has benefits to business in terms of access and social license, by engaging and addressing these sustainability issues, creating synergies and economies of scale by linking within and across the sectors, and ultimately creating stability and predictability in the activities that ocean companies are undertaking. As I was mentioning, the World Ocean Council has been recognized by a growing number of international organizations, UN agencies, international business organizations, etc., as the global platform and portal. Importantly, for our discussion today about ocean weather and climate observations and data collection, we have a partnership agreement with the UNESCO Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, IOC. The World Meteorological Organization subsequently approached us to actually request, we explored developing an MOU, which we signed last year. And the other organizations you see there, International Hydrographic Organization regarding bathymetric data, etc. And so we really are linking with in particular for today's discussion, with the global science and data-oriented organizations in relation to the ocean and the weather and climate above the ocean. The overall framework for what we do at the World Ocean Council is a broad series of areas that I won't go into too much detail here. Just to highlight, we are, and in fact, I was personally here at the time that the SDGs were being developed, and SDG 14 regarding the ocean. We were the only business organization in the room at the UN to help bring the sort of ensure that economic activity and responsible ocean business activity was a part of the discussion and development of SDG 14. We do bring together, we're working to bring together the innovation initiatives around the world, the accelerators, incubators, and challenge competitions, etc., as part of our overall ocean investment platform that I mentioned. And also working at a regional level, particularly progress has been made in the Arctic in helping foster and facilitate industries and leadership companies to collaborate in the Arctic, and this is moving forward in other areas. And in relation to the U.S. specifically, I'd say there's particular interest and opportunity here in the Caribbean more broadly, and certainly linking with the regional coastal and ocean observing networks under the umbrella of IOS in the U.S. system. We do gather the global ocean business and investment community every year at what we call the Sustainable Ocean Summit. It's really the only business gathering dedicated to ocean economic activity and sustainable development at that global multi-industry scale. To get more into the specifics that will lead us to the core topic today, I wanted to give you a sense of what we cover in terms of program areas then. And I won't go into these in detail. You can see on the screen a range of impact issues that are, again, multi-industry and international, if not global in scale. With the biofouling, we are the ocean industry partner for the 5-year glow fouling project that the GEF, IMO, International Maritime Organization, and United Nations Development Program are coordinating after having sort of pushed and contributed to getting that global effort going for many years. The marine sound or ocean noise issue, working to advance and engage business and investment in the development of port reception facilities to better tackle the plastics and marine debris issue. And the other issues you can see listed here, many of which are, of course, relevant to NOAA and its programs and partners. And so happy to pick up discussions on these other issues that aren't the focus for today's discussion. An additional of the program areas, additional list of the program areas include working on port and coastal infrastructure adaptation and resilience to sea level rise and especially extreme weather events. And this is something where we are very actively developing an international business and investment leadership group, and would be happy to pick that up with the relevant folks at NOAA. In addition to our efforts to carefully carefully put on the table the need for a discussion about negative emissions technologies that we've been discussing at sessions at the Sustainable Ocean Summit each year for many years, and now that's much more becoming much more of an open topic for discussion. Ocean carbon dioxide removal, that we're actively again engaging the business and investment community in exploring that. Renewables, obviously a key part of addressing climate change and advancing low and no carbon energy from the sea. In particular, what as an inter-industry organization, we've been working to help ensure there's a good dialogue between offshore renewables, especially wind, and other sectors, especially fisheries, where there have been perceived or real conflicts that have delayed moving forward with renewable energy. And it's important to make sure that the fishing community and others are actively engaged. And as a B2B organization, we've been doing what we can to facilitate those kind of interactions around renewable energy interactions with other sectors. And in terms of this overview of the programs, what we'll get into more detail here is the Smart Ocean, Smart Industries program, in which we're working to accelerate and expand the role of industry in data collection. There are many efforts that have been going on for many years, some on a sort of ad hoc, off and on basis, and many steady programs. Obviously, the Global Ocean Observing System being one of the ones that many are familiar with, the Voluntary Observation System from the World Meteorological Organization. So some great programs and great efforts at NOAA and by individual universities and other programs, and certainly the the efforts of IOS and the regional, excuse me, U.S. coastal ocean and ocean observing systems to engage industry. What we were requested early on as the World Ocean Council got started by a number of key global companies was the need for a more sort of a system and a platform to have a more standardized and sustained and comprehensive engaging of industry. So industry in the potential to collect and share data. So comprehensive in the sense of all industries, so not just focusing on big shipping, but as we'll talk about in a few minutes, all of the sectors that have vessels and platforms, comprehensively speaking about a global scale, comprehensive in the sense of all parameters and potential source of data that could be collected. So not just focusing on, say, physical and chemical oceanography, but also, as we've mentioned, weather and climate data, also the bathymetric data, etc. So really creating a portfolio of possibilities to engage industry in potentially being involved in data collecting and sharing in ways that we'll get into a bit more detail in a few minutes. So really creating this Smart Ocean, Smart Industries system to facilitate and broker the interaction between the science and technology community and the companies with vessels and platforms, and expand this and improve the coordination and efficiency. As a lot of the feedback we've had from companies was that they would like to be involved, but they need someone that understands them and their operational issues and concerns, and someone that provides a greater level of continuity in the relationship. And we also heard that from a lot of the scientists and observation people that have been involved, that there will be turnover in a company they've been working with, and they had installed equipment and the vessel had been repositioned to another part of the world. And so to have someone that knows both parties and can serve as that middleman and that broker of the relationship. So the scale of the opportunity is enormous. And the term ships of opportunity is often used to describe when and how vessels are involved in participating in data gathering programs, and turning that kind of on its head to talk about opportunities of ships. And you can see the numbers here, which are greater than that 2010 data, but huge numbers and variety of kinds of vessels moving around the world, and not all on fixed routes that I think a lot of people have this notion that it's only kind of point A to point B kind of transects that vessels run, which is important for science purposes, but also getting to other parts of the world with other sorts of vessels creates opportunities as well, certainly with the geolocation capabilities that are now possible. The opportunities of fishing vessels, enormous, with the 4 million plus vessels now, and many operating in parts of the world that aren't being accessed otherwise, such as the Southern Ocean, and so the potential to be collecting data in areas that are less well visited. And all of this, of course, in a context of, as you know well, research and observation budgets being tight, if not reducing, equipment and vessels being limited, etc. Another part of the infrastructure that can contribute to data collection are the most recent numbers, 1.2 million kilometers, as I mentioned, of telecom cables. There is a Smart Cables initiative coordinated by the International Telecommunications Union of the UN. World Ocean Council is a part of that initiative. And a lot of effort has gone into developing the model or prototype demonstration project, and working to get the cable industry and those that are supporting the development of the expansion of new cables involved in this, and some incredible promise there in terms of having data from the seabed in many parts of the world. And of course, there are many other kinds of infrastructure that is out there, fixed and mobile, and important programs that are out there already. Oil and gas industry has had, as hopefully many of you know, cooperation with the science community by allowing scientists to have access to the video recordings from the ROVs and AUVs that they use, if not direct access to using those during downtime. Many ferry companies, especially in Europe, are involved in the Ferry Box program, where they have a standardized set of instrumentation installed to collect water quality data. And so what the potential is then is really to have each company that's operating vessels or infrastructure in the ocean to really consider, what they could be doing to participate in data gathering or sharing. And that can be in several ways: through hosting instrumentation, through deploying instruments such as the GOOS Global Drifter Program, which is administered by NOAA and supported by US taxpayers, essentially, to a large extent. So deploying instruments, hosting instruments, sharing bathymetric data that's collected in a way that makes it possible to be appropriate quality for hydrographic map purposes. The potential also to share existing data. Many companies, especially those with fixed infrastructure, have, as many of you are involved in, the EIAs that are required, permits that are required, baseline studies for cables, etc. And a lot of that information is in company filing cabinets and is no longer commercially or otherwise sensitive. And with someone to facilitate companies opening up those filing cabinets, that data could be made available to the appropriate national, regional, and international scientific institutions that maintain the data on, say, seabed microfauna that was documented during a baseline study for an aquaculture facility. So what we do, as per this slide, we engage those two parties, the scientific institutions and the technology providers on one side, to understand what are the priority collection needs, what kinds of data, in what locations, and what sort of technology is available to supply that data flow that's of interest. And on the other hand, to identify and recruit the companies that have the vessels or platforms and could be interested and capable of being involved, and then really developing that relationship, and then introducing the parties and brokering that a bit, and then getting out of the way, but then maintaining a sort of a monitoring and facilitation role as the relationship and the efforts move along. One of the examples of how that's played out that directly involved NOAA, a number of years ago, colleagues here at the University of Hawaii had developed the technology to be able to detect tsunamis from a moving vessel in the open sea, which really can be an important, a huge contribution to understanding the movement of tsunamis, as the dart buoys that are anchored around the perimeter of the Pacific Basin and now some in the Indian Ocean, many of them 20 to 30% maybe not operational at any given time. They are large and expensive to install and maintain. So if we could have a grid of vessels moving across the ocean, it would be a huge step up in terms of real-time data on tsunami movement. They had an initial prototype instrument on the University of Hawaii vessel that worked out and wanted to scale up and had potential funding, and NOAA was involved in this, but needed then to deploy. And so they reached out to us, and we, within weeks, had 2 major shipping companies involved and helped broker that relationship to get the instruments out on the vessels. And as I said, we introduced the parties, got the relationship going, and then got out of the way and let the scientists and technology people talk to the ship captains and the fleet managers and so on. And that has been a very successful interaction. There are other examples that maybe we can get into those in the discussion period here, but and there's lessons learned as we moved along, and the opportunity then to engage with the key science agencies, the key observation agencies at a global and regional and national level is a key part of how we would like to partner and scale up. And so, as mentioned, there are these different ways that companies can get involved, and many good companies have gotten involved in different ways, as I say, sometimes in a short-term and ad hoc way. In fact, I'll give you one other example. In discussions with our colleagues at Goose and NOAA, by connection there, one of the sort of low-hanging fruit or sort of gateway opportunities here that was less complicated for companies to understand is the Global Drifter Program. It's very straightforward. The NOAA has done a great job in making the instrumentation available, and you can deliver it to ports so that vessels can pick it up. There's a training program and materials available. And so we've worked to get companies, when we present when they are interested, we give them a series of options. And then within the deploying instruments category, then we identify and provide more information on the Global Drifter Program as an example. And that often is the kind of thing that they see as a way to get involved for the reasons I just explained. It's an easier one to start with. And what we want to do is get companies engaged, and then see about upscaling in the future to other kinds of data collection and sharing. Often companies aren't even aware that they've been involved. So, for example, with one of the world's largest container shipping company, we were going through this process, and they had said, okay, let's explore the Global Drifter Program a bit more. And then I looked more deeply into that to update what I already knew to be the case, and identified that they had in fact 18 times had vessels, or 18 vessels from that company had already been involved in global drifter deployment. At the headquarters level, they weren't aware of that, and it wasn't a problem. It's just that that's the sort of ad hoc nature of some of the relationships, been directly with vessels between universities or agencies. And what we want to do here, again, this idea of a comprehensive, scalable approach, to have that sort of HQ level commitment of a company to really look at their entire fleet or potential for being involved in data collection and sharing. One of the interesting specifics in this is how much the information that's can be presented to companies can help excite their interest. So with a global major multinational oil and gas company, the head of their maritime operations, we were also getting him interested in the Global Drifter program. And one of the things that really worked well for him, when I was able to show him the NOAA Global Drifter program Goose heat maps of where the data gaps are. And when he saw that, he said, oh, look at these white spots on the map. We sail through here, we sail through there. You know, how do we get involved in this program? And we were moving well along with that. And unfortunately, that was 2015. And then the oil market, the price situation collapsed, and companies had other priorities in terms of dealing with their personnel time and effort. So it didn't move forward at that time, but we're reviving that discussion. So to wrap this up, here's some thoughts on where we are going with this. Really, as I was just saying, you know, wanting to get companies to take a full company look at this and really consider this, and we link it to SDG 14.A, which is basically says increase ocean knowledge, and really encourage companies to think about here's a way they can directly be involved in implementing a key part of SDG 14. Focusing on key parameters that are of interest to the science and government community and the sustainable development community, that then create a sense of a mission for the companies that to help get them involved. And there's, like with bathymetry now, there's the CBIT 2030 campaign, for which WOC is a key industry portal partner. Obviously, things that affect communities and economic activities, such as extreme weather events or tsunamis, taking a regional approach where that makes sense. And we have a lot going on in the Arctic through support from a number of European Commission projects to really scale up the involvement of industry and data collection there, and also to help the science community understand what industry data needs are. And so we have an industry liaison panel, for example, that we've created and operate regarding the Arctic. And overall, really continuing to build up this value proposition and rationale, and making sure we're aware of all the existing programs that are out there and which companies have been involved, and creating this kind of menu of options so that companies can really look through that and see where they want to fit in as we move forward with this. I won't spend a lot of time on this in the next slide, but for those of you that are wondering, you know, why work with the World Ocean Council, or why work with an industry organization as opposed to just working with an individual company, and NOAA has some great partnerships with individual companies and a really important and valuable track record of working with those companies on ocean observations, and that's great. What we're suggesting and what companies are interested in is this, as I say, this more comprehensive platform that creates the sort of sustained and an overall approach to this. And so using a third-party intermediary organization is one of the terms to serve as that portal and bridge, so that science and technology organizations and observation programs don't have to go company by company and figure out the relationship and develop the personal interactions. We've got that network. As per the description of the World Ocean Council, we've got 35,000 business and investment contacts around the world now, and we have many of those are industry associations themselves for, say, shipping in Asia, or fisheries in Australia, etc. So a huge multiplier effect there, and many industry media and business media contacts that help put out the information when we announce things and opportunities to get involved in things like data collection. So we can facilitate in a very efficient and cost-effective way as a specialist organization focused on engaging industry in ocean science and sustainable development, and particularly on observation. So I'll leave this for you, for those of you that are interested in understanding more about why work with what's called a boundary or intermediary organization, and how we can be, the World Ocean Council is unique in being the global business and sustainability and science intermediary organization that could provide and is working to provide that third-party platform and the long-term commitment to an ever-expanding group of business contacts around the world. So let me end with this this note of just a sort of maybe suggestions for the discussion here in the time we have left and moving forward. That NOAA is the global leader on ocean observations in terms of a single individual national entity, and influences so much of the world of ocean weather and climate observations through its participation in the international programs. And so how can we collaborate best to specifically for today's discussion advance and expand industry involvement in collecting and sharing data, not only ocean data, but weather and climate data. And for those of you involved in other or related portions of NOAA's important and extended role in the world and in the ocean, these other issues, topics that I've mentioned here, marine debris and plastics, marine sound, marine mammals, coastal adaptation and resiliency, biodiversity and marine protected areas, etc. So happy to pick up those discussions that we've had off and on over the years about working with and through the World Ocean Council. And then also lastly, thinking about over the sort of broader, longer term, that a strong and vibrant program and relationship between NOAA and the World Ocean Council could then help also create a multiplier effect by encouraging your peer agencies in other countries to also engage through the global ocean business platform that the World Ocean Council provides. So with that, I will stop and I'll leave this slide up as just a background for our discussion. And I understand that Lisa is aware of the questions that have come in and will be facilitating the discussion at this point. So thanks very much for your attention, and look forward to the discussion now and any follow-up that people are interested in. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, Paul. Your presentation has generated a lot of questions. Before we start, I just want to remind the audience that we're going to take the next 18 minutes to answer any of your questions. But please continue to type them in the question box and I'll read them to Paul. So this first question came in early in your presentation, and it asks, do you have contacts with IT departments with main shipping lines? Have you mentioned to any ID departments the possibility of working with our US VOS program?
So that very last piece on the DOS program has not been a specific area of discussion, but that's certainly something that could be we could pursue, and that's again the value of having a more detailed interaction with NOAA is understanding those programs and where we can help connect things up. We are involved on the IT side, so we interact a lot with the satellite companies and the telecoms companies, and in fact we've got a major new partnership with, there's a global sustainable development initiative amongst the major IT companies that they've invited us to be a partner in, and we're now exploring how to operationalize that. Bringing it back to the specifics of the question, we often then get put in touch with the IT departments as the relationship develops. And so that's a part of who we interact with. It's not the entry point for us so much, but it's a part of developing that set of contacts within any company that does want to get involved in this sort of thing.
Excellent, thank you. The next question asks, many of the leading or fastest growing ocean industries don't have an obvious stake in ocean health and productivity. For example, energy, intense mariculture, shipping, etc. Are there incentives in addition to reputational value for these to help protect ecosystems?
Well, I'd say there's there's a whole spectrum of company interests and concerns, and this is at one level it's all about leadership, and so we work to identify and seek out and engage leadership companies, big and small, leadership in the sense of they care about the ocean and they care about their role in the future of the ocean. there are incentives for companies of all sorts to get involved here. So the ecosystem protection side may not be the driving point so much as safety and sustainability and cost effectiveness of operations. So, shipping, I've heard many times when we've talked about this that people say, well, why does shipping care? They could be sailing over a dead ocean. There is that, as the questioner pointed out, this interest in reputational value for participating in programs like this, but more operationally and germane to the direct role of business operations is increasing safety at sea. And so if data collection is involved in ocean weather and climate data that helps improve modeling and forecasting and predicting of extreme weather events, that saves lives, and there's nothing more important than that to a company. It saves operational expenses. So there are incentives. They may not be exactly ecosystem protection oriented, but there are incentives for gathering data, and we work to harness those interests and create that kind of win-win. And as I say, if we can get companies involved in data collection for reasons that create value and benefit to them, then later on, if there's, as the MBON effort moves forward, and there's plug and play kind of sensors that can be collecting ecological or biological data, and we've got a company already involved for other reasons, maybe we can get them involved in more ecosystem oriented data collection.
Excellent. The next question asks, when data is collected in different EEZs, how are the permissions granted and reporting done for these states?
Yeah, very good question. So there is a concern, a situation under the law of the sea about what is considered scientific data collection, marine scientific data, and that is something that is still an area of discussion as to whether ocean observations constitute scientific data collection as defined in the law of the sea, which then requires the coastal state, the owner of that EEZ, to approve that. I'm just thinking back, it's been a little while since I've dived into this issue. There are observations in transit, and certainly I stand to be corrected if I'm not up to date on this, largely have been okay. But it's, I'd have to defer a little bit on that, and happy to pick that up. I'd have to check back somewhat on the status of that discussion, but it's a hot topic of concern, as is natural for coastal countries, about what data is being collected in their jurisdiction and how that gets transmitted and to whom it goes. So it's an area that some of you on the call may know more about than I do, and something we need to work on. And certainly was a concern for the shipping industry, the cable industry, et cetera, when we explore this. So we'll have to pick that back up.
Okay. This question asks, what technologies are the ships using for tsunami detection?
I would refer you to our colleagues at the University of Hawaii, and please feel free to email me about that. I can put you in touch. It's, they detected the tsunami just by serendipity years ago, because the georeferencing capabilities were so precise that they had this signal that came through on the with the movement of the vessel and a passing, long period wave. And they said, well, what's this? And then they analyzed the data and looked back, and there had been a moderate or medium earthquake in Chile, I think it was, that they had picked up. And they realized that there was this possibility to sort out that signal. And they developed the specific instrumentation to focus on that. So happy to connect you with the folks that have developed that.
Great. That information will be included at the end of the presentation. I'll send that to you. The next audience member says, very nice presentation. How much biological data are now being collected? Whale observations, plankton recorder. Are plans underway to expand these data collection efforts?
There is certainly a lot going on in the area of observations from the personnel on board vessels, for example, and on board platforms. There's a variety, so basically adapting citizen science to sort of corporate citizens that have their eyes on the water. And there's a lot of great programs, projects, and apps that are available that people are using. And so that's the kind of thing where, again, it's a gateway, it's an easy entry point for companies to make those programs known to their personnel and encourage them to get involved and participate. So there's a lot of that's going on. And what we want to do, again, is provide this sort of portal so that companies, as they're analyzing what would be possible, that they can easily then go to a clearinghouse and plug into the relevant program for marine mammal, for seabird, et cetera, kind of observations. The overall, and I imagine some of the appropriate folks are at the event here. There's a significant move to try and develop biological observation possibilities through the use of vessels of opportunity, and there's an active discussion going on around that. The current state of the art is not something I've got off the top of my head, because it's been mainly in the science and observation realm and not come over so much when we talk about sort of automated data collection, come over to industry volunteer observation programs yet, but it's something we certainly want to encourage and facilitate that linkage to really scale up that involvement in biological data gathering.
Great. Next question. Nice talk. From what you have presented, it seems that the ocean industries are very open to collecting and sharing data for research purposes with no financial gain. How does the WOC envision the role of the commercialization of data collection in attaining the goals of the WOC related to ocean data collection, sharing, and archiving?
So the role of commercialization of data, I think, well, one of certainly from the large companies, well, pretty much across the board, one of the baseline levels of discussion on this is that companies want to be involved in only if the data is going to public databases. So this is kind of a non-negotiable piece of it. And I said, well, of course, that's what we're after here. And there are these national, regional, and international programs that the World Ocean Council is connected to. So what we want to do is increase the flow of data through those pipelines to NOAA and its peers around the world in different countries, and then up through to Goose and IOC, or up through to WMO for the meteorological, etc. So we don't get involved in, if companies want to do this on a data for pay kind of basis, that's not within the realm of what we're discussing and encouraging companies to get involved in. That's of course their prerogative if they feel there's an opportunity in the market out there, and that may be something that we need to work more on if that becomes if there's significant kinds of data that could be made available if there was more of a business model for it. Where though this does, part of the discussion and the rationale here though is also creating business opportunities in terms of the use of the data, as many data use companies do already. They make use of the publicly available data that taxpayers support at NOAA in the US through NOAA and different organizations around the world, to create analysis, interpretation, and outputs that then are valuable to companies regarding water levels, detailed water level analysis in ports that are important to, say, the mining industry in Western Australia, and other sorts of outputs. And so two things: increasing the involvement of those technology innovators and service and data analytics or analysis providers is good for business, good for the ocean industries overall. in that broader sense of who's the ocean business community. And secondly, if we've got, instead of a few hundred vessels involved in different data collection programs, we've got thousands of vessels and platforms. That creates a bigger market for the technology providers and innovators, and then that of course helps NOAA and public agencies have more data through more energy efficient, more effective sensors, for example. And so there's a real virtuous circle there, cycle there that can be developed by increasing industry involvement and expanding the market demand for good technology and data provision.
Great. Wow, we really have a lot of questions. This next question asks, what do you consider to be or have been the biggest blockers to data collection? For example, lack of awareness of its importance, commercial confidentiality, and how do we remove these blockers? Thank you.
Yeah, and that's really what we're kind of facing on a day-to-day basis. It's different with different companies. I'd say it's really a lack of, in general, a lack of awareness of what it would take to get involved. So companies are generally aware of most people, say fleet managers of a big shipping company would be aware of this idea in general. But what it's really come down to is the relationships and the contacts and the putting in the time and effort with the right people. And just to very quickly illustrate that, when the cruise company that did these historic transits twice of the Northwest Passage a number of years ago, I reached out to them and said, has anybody from the science community gotten in touch with you about collecting data? And they said, well, no, why, why? And then I explained why it would be valuable. And they said, oh, that's interesting. And I had to get through to the senior vice president for maritime operations. I didn't know him or that company in particular directly, but through our contact network was able to get through to and get the introduction. And he basically said, yeah, we'll put together, a couple pages on that. I can, evaluate and take up to the CEO and see if we want to be involved. I went back to my science colleagues in Canada and got, no disrespect intended, got 2 20-page documents that then we distilled into kind of business language, and that went up through to the CEO, and we got the green light. And within other constraints in terms of time and partnership availability from the technology companies, we're able to get them involved. So the blocker was that relationship, just not having that detailed operational specific opportunity put in front of a company and the time and effort to build and maintain that relationship over many months and be able to quickly pull in the scientific information, the technology information. So that's really the key issue, is just reaching out, engaging, and maintaining that engagement with the companies. And NOAA's done a great job of that with several of the companies in the shipping and cruise industry and others that the organization has been involved in partnering with.
All right. Well, this is, I'm going to give you one last question, although there are many more because we're approaching the hour. The question is, how do research groups interested in ocean sampling / observations get connected to interested partnerships?
Right. Well, that's what that's really the fundamental role of this platform or portal that we're working to develop. And to be frank, and relating back to the last question, is the capacity at the World Ocean Council itself as a not-for-profit intermediary organization, the ability to develop those relationships with companies and do that matchmaking and brokering between institutions, as that last question was referring to, and the potential companies that would be involved. Simply having the human resources to do that work is a part of the key consideration here. And so in an ideal world, we'd have sort of on one hand the list of scientific institutions and their interest, and agencies and their interest in which kind of, as I was saying earlier, which kind of parameters and which kind of locations are a priority for what reasons, and what technology would be involved in that data collection. And on the other hand, have, as we do have, a list of companies that have vessels or platforms or fishing boats in that area and doing that matchmaking. So creating those two pieces and then developing more strongly and more consistently that intermediary matchmaking mechanism is really the core of this. So what we would like to suggest to NOAA and other interested parties is help us help you by, are there people that can work with us as part of a working group, as part of their role to advance ocean observations, to help, as in responding to the question, or help develop the list of the institutions and their interests, parameters and geographic interests as a way, so we've got that file on hand that then we can use as we reach out to companies to explore what they can get involved in.
Okay, wow, you really have generated quite a few questions here. Do you have any last comments, Paul or David?
I would just say that we, as just per my last comments, we are interested in and really we would all, as a collective sort of ocean observation community, benefit from a robust Smart Ocean, Smart Industries program, and anything that can be brought to the table in terms of time and effort, funding, of course, and other partnerships that can help us replicate, accelerate, leverage what we've got going here, and the potential to really fully realize the potential is welcome. So happy to have people get in touch with me to see how we can do that. And I'd really, ideally, we'd have a sort of a NOAA, and this is why I've been reaching out to NOAA, and was very happy to have David pick up the interaction, really see how we can create a strategic partnership here to really optimize the relationship between NOAA and the World Ocean Council.
Excellent. So audience, if your question was not addressed today, it will not be ignored. All questions will be sent to Paul and to David, who can respond offline. Also, a reminder that this webinar was recorded, and we encourage you to share the link with interested colleagues or watch the beginning of the presentation if you joined us late. You can find the recording on the NOAA Central Library YouTube channel or the Library Seminars webpage. I would like to conclude by thanking you, Paul, for sharing your experience with us, and to David for introducing Paul and bringing him to the Library Seminars platform. And to you, the audience, I truly appreciate that you joined us today for the Library Seminar. NOAA Central Library is very proud to present the work of the NOAA community and its partners, and we hope that you will join us again. Be well, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Paul.